Well, hello and welcome to Gone Your Soul.
This is a Rites and Rituals podcast.
And we are today going to be discussing...
Well, first I'll say I'm Lindy.
Well, if you don't know her already, that's Lindy. It's like the two Ronnies.
I know. All they know is funny. I'm Lindy, that's Victoria. And we're here to talk about ceremony and ritual and spirituality.
And all things that go with.
Through a Scottish lens. And today we invite you to join us as we step into the world of sacred objects and sacred spaces. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, if you spend more than 5 minutes with a Rites and Rituals ceremonialist, you will undoubtedly hear the word sacred more than a few times. But more than you can shake a stick at, right? But what does it mean to say something is sacred? What makes or what gives an object or a space that quality of sacredness? And how do our spaces, whether natural or everyday or ceremonial, become containers for spirit? So I thought we could start off by talking about that word sacred, because that word
It's a scary word.
Can be a bit of a scary word itself. But the word sacred just means to set apart. So when we're saying that something is sacred, we're saying that it is not ordinary. It is somehow different, and therefore we should pay a wee bit more attention to it. We should show it reverence. So in older traditions, the word sacred was often reserved for things like temples and holy books and religious buildings and deities.
Big stuff.
So we're very much connected, explicitly connected with religion.
And that's why it's a scary word.
Yes,
Because
well, it's
a sacred object to me, without doing this work, would have meant something that is, you don't touch
religious.
it. You know,
yeah,
it's very
got
high,
those huge religious
church
connotations.
kind of things.
But as time has gone on, and I think primarily with the emergence of non-religious spirituality, that word has not taken on a new meaning, but it's broadened. It's broadened in its
Softened?
meaning. Yeah, broadened, softened. So nowadays, to say something is sacred is really saying that it has deep meaning, it has intention, it has presence, and it has love. So we've gone from it having these really religious connotations to having these really gentle, almost like everyday connotations.
Because you find if you're talking to your couples, you know, if you're talking to a couple who are getting married, you may say, you know, when we get to that sacred moment where you can see them go, oh, it's not a word that sits comfortably with people. But what we need to do is to use it more and more so it becomes part of our everyday language.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're kind of trying to change how people think about these words and ceremony and ritual and how we approach it. Because as ceremonialists, we are always working with the sacred. We're always consciously creating spaces in which the sacred can show itself. Right? So we do that. We'll talk about sacred spaces in a minute, but we talk about like objects, handfast and ribbon, a quaich. When we're working with these objects, we don't see them just as objects. We see them as much, much more than objects. Have you heard of Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, the writer?
Yes.
She will now.
No.
He talks so much about the symbology behind objects. And what he says is when we engage with an object, we do so at much more than just a surface value. He said the word doors, an object is a door.
Oh, I love that.
Well, another name for door is a portal, and that's how I view objects in ceremony. They are portals to another plain. So when we're doing a hand fasting, and I say to my couples, don't think of it just as, and for anybody that doesn't know what hand fasting is, here in Scotland we have this beautiful ritual called a hand fasting, where pieces of cloth are wrapped around a couple's hands, and it symbolises the joining together of two individuals, two lives, two clans, really. But I'll say to my couples, don't think of it as just you're getting a piece of cloth wrapped around your hands. What is the point of that? That's completely pointless. You have to recognise that act is pointing to something much bigger than just a cloth getting wrapped around your hands. So as Joseph Campbell would have said, that hand fasting ribbon is a portal. And to me, it's a portal to the past, to all those who have gone before and had their hands bound, to all those young couples in love that were filled with hope for their lives together. That is all there in that act of binding hands.
And as rites and rituals ceremonialists, it is our job to educate and to inform our couples, because a lot of time when somebody, they may say to us, oh, I was at my cousin's wedding and they did that thing with the, out of Outlander where they tied their hands together. That was brilliant. What a great photo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make a great photo.
It does. It makes a lovely photo. And I get that. I totally understand that.
It's not an Instagram moment.
No.
It's a connection. It's about connecting with something greater and deeper. And when you explain that, most of the time they're blown away.
Yes.
They're like, wow, didn't know that.
Yeah. You can see that when you're having those conversations. But you're absolutely right. We most celebrants bring lots of stuff into ceremonies with them, depending on what a couple have asked for. But hand fasting ribbons, quaich, candles, pens. If we're marrying people, we have to bring pens, and we bring all these objects in. But they're not just for show. Mm. They're not just for photographs. They can look beautiful in photographs, that's a bonus. But as far as we are concerned, us that are holding that space for ceremony, they are much, much more than just the surface object. And again, if we go back to Joseph Campbell, he was once asked on a video, and I don't know, I can't remember if I've seen this video or if I just read about him being on this video. Anyway, somebody said to him, how do you make something sacred? And he took his watch off and put it on the table and drew a line round it with his finger, like a cane round it with his finger, and said, now it's sacred because I've made it so. And I love that. So it's not about the object itself.
It's about the intention.
It's about how you relate to that object. So you can take a hand fasting ribbon or a quaich and you can just say, here, take a sip between you. Or you can make that sacred by recognising that act, that wee cup, that beautiful wee Scottish cup, is about much, much more than them just sharing a dram of whiskey.
And it is a beautiful moment. I think all of our ceremonialists, there is a moment, if we are using an object for a ritual within ceremony, obviously not so much if you're doing funerals, mainly in weddings, where you have the time to have that little mini history lesson, that you take a moment to explain to all of the guests sitting there what is about to happen. And it goes back to storytelling as well. You're telling a story, you're bringing in something from the past, and people then can connect to it and engage with it. And that's a beautiful, and you can feel the energy change,
Yeah.
And it's not, absolutely not, we're all going, and here is the quaich. I mean, most times it's fun, we do you do crazy things. In fact, I'm doing one with some mad dog that I've got to put in.
Yeah, I've had all sorts of things in the quaich.
But it still has that element.
But I know inside, it doesn't matter if they're putting mad dog in it or not, and everybody's laughing and it's all fun. Ha 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 ha. Yes, that's the superficial stuff. But we know at a much deeper level what's happening. We know that object is pointing past itself to something much, much bigger, because otherwise what's the point of doing it? And so when we're talking about the sacred, because when you think about I was thinking about this in the way down, when you think about your ceremonies, where does the sacred show itself? So for me, if we talk about a funeral ceremony, the sacred shows itself in that pause just before you start. That pause where everybody's sitting, say it's the crematorium, everybody's sitting in the crematorium. And we've gone past the stage where they're all talking rubbish to each other and they've come into the present moment. The coffin's been brought in, it's been placed in the catafalque, we've all bowed, everybody's stepped away, the music has faded down, and there's that, what I call the sacred pause. Mm. And where you are just holding that room with your presence, and you're making eye contact with whoever, but you're holding the gazes of the people that you're resting on. To me, the sacred is in that. Because the sacred lives in that moment.
Because the sacred is holding you,
The sacred is holding that whole beautiful space. And everybody's just sitting there feeling as if they're wrapped up in a big blanket. They don't quite, they're not sitting there going, oh, the sacred lives in this moment.
Hallelujah!
But I know that. I can feel it. And there's those moments throughout the ceremony where you really feel the depth of the sacred. Now, the sacred is always there, always around us just now, it's working through us just now. But what happens in ceremony is that ceremony makes space for the sacred to show itself. And so that's where it can really, really come to the fore and really step forward into that space with all its power and hold that space for whoever needs it, which is everybody, me and you included. So I absolutely love that. And it's the same in wedding ceremonies. There's these beautiful moments in between all the fun and the laughter. We get a lot of fun, happy ceremonies. It's great. But there are these beautiful moments in between the fun and the laughter where the sacred lives, where the sacred really shows itself. And you recognise that this ceremony is being held in a way none of us can understand. We can feel it. It's visceral. You can feel it when it's there. But... and it's very, very powerful.
So how do we live every day with the sacred? From day to day? I mean, I feel this. I feel being held all the time. Sometimes we're not engaged, but to live as sort of surrounded by a sacred. I mean, are you saying that the sacred is the same as spirit?
Yes.
Yes.
So it was the same.
Same as,
yeah, it's the same.
So
just
and it's
semantics.
Allowing space for that to come in, that energy to come in. Into
Well, I think
life.
ceremony does that. Ceremony does something completely different to just everyday life. When you recognise, again, you, through your intention, are making that circle. I think a ceremony in terms of, being a circle, you're making that ceremony sacred because you bring your intention to it. You set the boundaries. You know exactly how... in terms of the mood that's been asked to be set. So you are stepping into that ceremony. I talk about stepping into ceremony, and I talk to my couples about you are stepping into ceremony. And when I go, say it's a wedding, and just before it starts, I go outside and I talk to the bride, and it's so hyper, and everybody's, where's my shoes and all that nonsense. And I will say, right, this is now time to stop and to breathe. And I'll say to the bride, okay, when you go through that door, you're not just walking through a door. You're going through a portal. The minute you're through there, you are stepping into ceremony, and something magical is going to happen if you open yourself up to it. I was talking to a couple this morning that hopefully are going to ask me to do their ceremony next year. And I was talking to them about that. I was saying, you're not just turning up at a venue and standing there, and I'm going to read from a book, and your guests are going to laugh, and if that's the case, go and get a stand-up comedian if that's just what you want. You have to recognise you are stepping into ceremony, and when we step into ceremony, we are going to be changed by it, and we need to bring a sense of reverence to it. Yeah, we can bring fun and laughter, but we can only bring that fun and laughter when I know we have brought a sense of reverence to it. When I know that you two get that you are stepping into something really big, and that you understand you're committing your life to each other in a way that means your intention is to live out your lives side by side. I know that doesn't always work out. I've been married and divorced twice. But that's your intention when you're in that moment.
I think if you lack that moment as well, I was thinking about this the other day, about the hype that weddings especially, and the amount of money that's ploughed into, and the stress that goes along, and especially nowadays with these, everything is online, that you're following these people, these young couples getting married, and it's a huge big party with thousands and thousands of pounds being spent. They lose sight of the threshold moment of the ceremony itself, which is to me, that's the heart of the day. And do they wake up, if they have missed that, do they wake up the next day with a bit of a hangover probably, going, oh, that was amazing, it was great, but do they feel any different?
Do they feel different? Do they remember it? I loved the couple that I spoke to this morning, because she said that it's one of these exclusive use venues, but there's going to be a guy there, some sort of wedding coordinator, and he kept talking about their wedding, and she said to him, we don't want to have a wedding day, we're getting married. And she said, I very much want it to be about the marriage. And I loved that, because I thought, you get it. You absolutely get it. And I was saying, what you don't want after your ceremony is, because we were talking about being grounded, and the more grounded you are, the better ceremony it'll be, the more special it'll feel, and the more you'll remember it. I said, you don't want to go away and think, what happened?
Yeah.
I said, you want to, in 10 years' time, be able to teleport yourself back to that day, see yourself standing in front of each other, and remember how that felt. Remember how that felt to be standing there in your wedding day saying, I do. From this moment on, I choose you, and I choose you every day until we die. You should be able to remember that. That's what you want to be able to do. And you will only do that if you are grounded in ceremony. You'll only do that if you understand the depth of what it is that you're stepping into. You'll only do that if you recognise that these objects that you've brought into your ceremony, because they start with a blank canvas, don't they? And they put up an arch.
Yes.
And then they have some candles. And then, there's a bit of some flowers sitting here. Usually that's just all for show, right? They don't think of it in terms of, what flowers am I choosing? Why am I choosing these flowers? Why am I bringing these in? What does that mean? I did a ceremony a couple of weeks ago up at the Croon in Loch Lomond, and everything that had been brought into the ceremony had been so thought out. Well
Beautiful.
Thought out.
Yeah.
And I always say, everything that you bring into ceremony brings its own energy. So the people, the chairs, the music, the words, the objects, they all bring their own energy. Now, that doesn't mean to say they have to be really expensive. It doesn't mean to say they have to have a huge history. I like things that have got a bit of a story behind them in some way. But actually, it doesn't have to be, as long as you bring your intention and you imbue it with meaning, and you give it, reverence and presence and love and all these things, then that's absolutely fine. But everything she had made, there was candles everywhere. She had made every candle. She spent a year making candles. And there was just all these wee touches, and the nameplates on the chairs were stones. They had gone for a walk. They'd collected those stones. They dragged those stones out and then sat and wrote everybody's names on them where they were sitting. So everything was done with heart. Everything was done with depth. Everything was done with meaning. And it just brought this extra level of depth to their ceremony.
But I find that it tends to be our Western culture that are more, don't tend to buy into that. You know, they don't have that intention. I mean, I don't know about you, but every time I go into a marriage space, the first thing you do is try and create, which we can talk about, is how to create that sort of sacred space initially. The signing table where you would sign your wedding schedule, a white table with a cloth. And I'm like...
Because that would traditionally be your altar table.
And there is nothing there. I mean, I always try and bring something and just to... Because 9 times out of 10, there is nothing there. Sometimes it's a beautiful bouquet of flowers or something lovely. 9 times out of 10, the place is decked out, flower arches, everything. And one of the most poignant moments and ritualistic moments is signing with the pen, and it's a dead space.
Yeah.
And I think, what is going wrong? What is going wrong there? And I did a beautiful wedding, and it was a Southern Indian wedding and a Scottish wedding at the Black Watch Museum. And when I turned up, the bride's family had already been there for like 2 hours. There was so much colour and depth, and everything had meaning from, and they were explaining everything. There was like bowls of grain, there was dishes with candles and flowers, and everything had a meaning. You know, that the seasons, it reflected the seasons of life of their particular area in India that they were from. Or the candle that they were burning, everything had meaning, had been passed down from grandparents, you know, great-grandparents to the bride. It was so beautiful, and I felt I was stepping into ceremony.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, it was such a beautiful moment.
So many sacred objects creating that.
And it wasn't, people weren't going, oh, yeah. It was joyful, there was laughter, we were setting it out, and it was so beautiful. And I thought, see, when my bride comes in, already the family have created something extraordinary.
So special.
So special.
Just because they've imbued these items with meaning and with depth and with reverence and all the things we just talked about it. And if you think most people, even if you wouldn't describe yourself as spiritual, I think we're talking absolute shit. Most people have objects in their life that mean a lot to them. That mean a great deal to them. I was cleaning out some of my daddy's things recently, and I found a lock of my sister's hair. My sister died when she was 23, so way back in 1987. And he kept that lock of hair, you know, his whole life. And I don't know if you saw the post I did on Facebook. So she died when she was 23.
Was this with the hair colour?
Yeah, and it's turned grey.
Oh, was that you?
That was me.
I thought that was a random, like one of those weird, like posts. That was you?
That was me. It was my sister's hair.
Found it. So,
I found a lock of my sister's hair.
Amazing.
So she died when she was 23. And when I took it out of the packet, it was as grey as... Because she would be... So I'm coming up 60, so she would be 63, 64. And it looked as if it had aged a long way. It was quite amazing. But anyway, that lock of hair was sacred to him. Because it was a part of her. It was so full of meaning. You know, people will say things like, I remember talking to a guy recently, and I was saying, "Are you working tonight?" It was a Sunday, and he went, "Oh no, Sundays are sacred." Now, I don't think he would have described himself as a particularly spiritual person, but I totally got what he meant. Oh no, the Sunday night's different from every other night. It's a very special night. You know, I pay attention. Whatever he was going to be doing, I totally got that. So most people will say things like, oh, you know, oh no, that's sacred to me. Or they have a wee object.
Or a piece of jewellery or something.
Jewellery. And they might not say it's sacred, but they'll say that's really meaningful to me. You know, I've got a ring on and it's got my dad's ashes in it. No, all of them, because he was a really big man, but...
just a sprinkling.
Wee sprinkling in there. But, so that's a sacred object because that's, you know, it's a wee part of him in there. And most people will have something. Children are great. They have wee sacred objects.
Well, look at
monster truck.
Their blankets.
Their wee blankets. And
but my kids, my boys, they had their little bubbas, you know. But are sacred to me. I still have them in my bedroom because it's part of their, and to me they are sacred objects.
Of course they are.
And and it is like, if you inherit something, or people say, oh, that was my granny's, that's a lovely thing. Nobody would say, oh, this is sacred to me. And it's just the use of language, but it means something.
It means so much. And it
It's
can
a
be
connection.
anything. It can be anything. So here's like a boring coffee cup. Now, it means nothing. You wouldn't actually say it was sacred. But imagine I took a drink of that and then just dropped dead. Victoria,
Well,
I
I'd be
know,
suing.
would keep...
I'll see how much money I can get first.
Victoria would be keeping that cup, and she would keep it forever up in her
put your ashes in
mantelpiece.
it.
But do you know what I mean? If you were out with your husband, something that they might hold on
Yeah.
to that because it's the last thing.
Exactly.
The last
it
thing
doesn't
you
mean to have
touch.
the value or...
No, it's the meaning that
Mm-hmm.
you give to something. So when we're talking about sacred objects, it's not something you need to go, oh my God, they're often a religious rant again. It's absolutely not. That's the whole point. You don't have to have any particular belief system to think that something is sacred.
So, because this gets me sometimes when I go to the crematoriums, and depending, because we're classed as celebrants, people do get confused with humanists and that kind of thing. And a lot of time, there's normally like a big kind of table altar type thing, which for Catholic ceremonies, they will have big candles and the crucifix with Christ on. And for other Christian ceremonies, the candles go, but the crucifix is still there without Christ on it. And I love all of these objects. And I get asked, oh God, I didn't take down the cross. And I'm like, unless the family has specifically said to me, absolutely no sacred objects, I don't see there's anything wrong with having that there. That to me, it's still a sacred object.
Well, it is, and it's a symbol of meaning to a lot of people. So just by seeing a cross can bring great comfort to a lot of people, and that's absolutely, I love the shape of the cross.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore it. It can bring a great deal of comfort. So there's absolutely nothing with it being there, unless, as the family said, we actually don't want, for whatever reason that might be, and that's their choice. Can we...
But I respect
lots
that
of
object.
crematoriums have a cross up and the family can ask for it to be taken down, but I respect, absolutely respect. I love when you go into a church or a chapel or and you walk through the door and you feel the sacredness. Right? You feel the sacredness of the building, and then you see some of the items that are up on the altar, these big, beautiful, gold, or I don't know if they're real gold, but ornate, ritualistic items that you feel the depth of them. The ceremonies often turn out to have no depth, which is a real shame, and it really saddens me. But the items themselves, the objects themselves, often are very beautiful and really draw you in, I think. And so that brings us on to sacred spaces. So we're talking about sacred objects. Anything can be sacred if you decide it is so. Make it so, as Jean-Luc Picard would say.
Star Trek,
Star Trek, come on, Victoria. But then we've got our sacred spaces. Because we, as ceremonialists, get to work in a whole variety of spaces. Some of them outside, and we are very fortunate to be living in this beautiful Scottish landscape. So we get to do ceremonies from Glencoe, Inverness, down to the borders, Ayrshire, Perthshire, everywhere in between. And then all these other indoor venues, from village halls to castles. But if we go back to sacredness and what makes something sacred, and if it comes down to that, it's about the meaning that you place in it, then if you live your life like that, or as a ceremonialist, you live your life like that, then that means that a village hall can be as sacred as a cathedral. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. To me, it makes perfect sense.
And so I
And
love
a cathedral could actually feel completely nothing in there.
Absolutely. Well, it was interesting. My two friends and I, my two school friends, I'm still friends with two girls I went to school with. And we went to Barcelona a few years ago. And of course, there's that big, beautiful cathedral right in the heart of the city. And we went in and we split up and we wandered around. And again, there's these beautiful objects. And there's all these tombs all round the side, really, really lovely. And at the end, we met and we went outside and we went for a drink. And I was saying, can I ask you, did you feel the weight of that place? Did you feel that there was something really special? And we all agreed that no, we didn't.
It's funny, isn't it?
Now, we're kind of coming on to the topic of thin places.
My favourite.
Your favourite. Because you get those spaces where we create the sacredness through bringing our intention to it. So if we go into, I don't know, a community centre and somebody's asked us to do a wedding.
On a badminton court.
Yes, so we're getting in there and we are setting our intention to hold this beautiful ceremony. We are thinking about stepping into ceremony. We're thinking about the sacred coming in and holding that space. So we make it a sacred. But then we have those spaces that we don't have to make sacred because they already know. And those are called thin places. Where will you describe what a thin place is?
Well, to me, a thin place is somewhere that resonates with you personally. It's something that you feel in a particular, it could be anywhere. And one person may not feel it in that place, another person might. And it's almost like heaven and earth. If you use the word heaven, a thin place is when the veil is thinning. So you're almost closer to the beyond. God. Or whatever your belief is. And a thin place when I'm in a thin place, I feel that connection so much stronger. It's easier to sort of engage. And it's like stepping through a portal. It's almost like having a foot in two worlds.
Very much so. So yeah, where the veil is thinner between the
and it happens at different times of year. You know, they say like at Halloween time. I know now we celebrate Halloween a very different way, but traditionally that's known to be a thin time where the veil is thinning. But thin places, I mean, you've got your places and I've got mine.
Well, we are very fortunate because Scotland is full of thin places. Yes. And, from Glencoe, so most people who know anything about Scotland will be familiar with Glencoe. You might never have been there. Glencoe is to me, and to many people, if you ask them, a thin place. So when you're driving through the Glencoe Valley, you feel as if you're in the presence of something much bigger. Now, you've got these beautiful mountains either side. You've got the Three Sisters and the Buchel and the Three Sisters, but you feel the presence of the sacred. It feels as if it is being held by something powerful and still and beautiful. The Outer Hebrides, so Callanish and Sand and Stones there, Iona, the beautiful island of Iona, on the west coast. So and those are just a few. Orkney. I've never been to Orkney, believe it or not.
We're going.
I was supposed to go a couple of years they have a sort of writers' festival, and then COVID hit, and I never go out, and I've never had a chance to get back, but never got a chance to go. But it's definitely on the bucket list. We have all these beautiful thin places in Scotland, but Victoria's right. One man's thin place is another man's thick place, and I think I mentioned in a previous podcast that I've been to some really lovely sites in the world. To Angkor Wat and to some of the big beautiful temples in Thailand and to the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal was a real shocker for me because you see that building, it looks as if it's floating in mid-air. It's the most symmetrical building. It's just beautiful, isn't it? What a beautiful example of architecture, but built on this love story. And when I went to visit it, And I was queuing up to get in, and I was just so excited because it's a tomb.
So you're expecting something wonderful to happen as you step in.
Well, I expected a stillness.
It's just chaos.
Absolute chaos. People shouting at each other. People come from all over India to see it because it's the Taj Mahal. And so there was just lines and lines, but people being really noisy, talking to each other, shouting across. These two tombs are there, so his and hers, and they're shouting across each other. And I was thinking, we are in the presence of death. We are walking round somebody's tomb, and nobody was bringing themselves to that moment.
It was
India's supposed to be this really
kind of
spiritual. It was just a tourist. It felt like a tourist trap. I couldn't wait to get out of that. And I found that with many of the temples and sort of spiritual places that I went to visit in India. But yeah, so that was a real shocker. But here in Scotland, we have some really beautiful, beautiful thin places that you don't have to try and create the sacredness. It's there.
Yeah, you're stepping into it. You don't have to create something to others to step in. It's just there.
Yeah, which is really lovely. I think we mentioned, was it our last podcast or the one before that, about acknowledging when you're in the land and acknowledging the sacred and whoever else is
dwelled upon
that land and is holding that land. But I don't think it's often a conversation couples or families have with themselves about the spirit of the land, the sacredness of the land. It's more, oh, Glencoe looks nice, or I get lots of couples coming from overseas. They've never ever been to Scotland, but they'll go, oh, we want to go to Glencoe, we've heard it's really, really nice. And of course, you're really privileged to get them on Zoom and to say, well, let me tell you about Glencoe,
yes.
Let me tell you how it feels to be there. So they start to think about their ceremony in an altogether different way, rather than, oh, we're just having this ceremony. So it goes from being this kind of superficial, we need to get some flowers and I need to take my dress over and we get some photographs, and all of a sudden it comes down to something much deeper. And they start to think about the fact that, oh my goodness, we are going to be in this kind of like a kind of magical circle as we renew our vows or make these pledges to each other. Or
you create your own cathedral in places like that because they're holding
that's
you.
That's exactly what it's like.
And I think, as you say, we are very blessed in Scotland to have that. And I don't know why we have that magic in there.
Well, maybe
others don't feel it.
Lots of Indians would think the Taj Mahal is the most spiritual place. They might feel that. So, as we said before, one man's thin place is another man's thick place. Just because I didn't feel that reverence and that sacredness there doesn't mean to say it wasn't there for them. Whereas us here in Scotland, maybe we feel it more than others do. There's certainly a thread with some places. Iona, the Western Isles, Glencoe, that people will say again and again, it's spooky.
But it's because because it's a thin place, you can feel and hear and almost smell and see the echoes of history. And it's not all good. I mean, Glencoe, it's not all good, the history that you are in. But it's that feeling that you are stepping into another world.
Yeah.
But we have to, going back to ancestral work, it's the same thing. It's that feeling that you have to ask permission, you have to be grateful to be stepping into ceremony in a space like that because they're holding you. And it's easier to feel it in a space like that. What's not easy is when you walk into a Hilton hotel, Premier Inn. Walk into Premier Inn and you're expected to create a sacred space out of literally
A white
plastic
tablecloth
tables and a,
yeah.
And
that's when it's really important.
Fire exit sign.
Everybody, that's when it's really important that everybody understands, because anybody that's watching this is having a ceremony and thinking, oh, well, I'm getting married in the Premier Inn, or I'm getting married in Lochside, or I'm getting, how do I make sure it has that depth? Or they start questioning, does my space have that? Or, because you'll have conversations with your couples like me. What made you go to your venue? Is there a story behind it?
Well, I was laughing actually the other day because obviously Lindy trained me, and Lindy has this sort of go-to sheet. It's like a questionnaire that helps us and our couples, when we're sort of finding our feet as, working with our couples. And one of the questions that is on that is, why have you chosen your venue for today? I think I've maybe asked that once when it was a nice venue.
All right.
I've kind of gone, why have you chosen the venue? And they're like, oh.
It's one of the first questions I ask.
It's funny, isn't it?
If they come on Zoom, I say, so tell me why you chose that venue. Is there a story behind it? Rather than just start going, here's what I'm going to do for you. Tell me. And, sometimes it is, because there's this story behind it. My mum and dad were married there. Oh my goodness, that brings sacredness to it. So immediately I know that sacredness is already there because their parents get married there. But more often than not, it was just the first place. It was the first place we saw, and we walked in, and we just felt that was really nice. Sometimes they'll say it was the price. I mean, people are honest.
Of course.
It was the price, or we knew we wanted it to be outdoors, and we got there, and it just looked really lovely. A lot of people choose the first venue they go and visit, I find. But I like to ask that question because it gives you a bit of an insight into either there is a story behind it, or they've just picked it because it was convenient in whatever way, shape or form, which is absolutely, absolutely fine. But it just means when I'm working with them and I'm putting the ceremony together, then I kind of know the work that's cut out for me. In terms of, and I've done ceremonies. I think I did a ceremony once in the hotel at Edinburgh Airport. It wasn't quite a Premier Inn, but it wasn't far from it. And it was during COVID, so there was only like 7 people allowed in, and it was this huge
conference room.
Huge conference room. And what I had to do, was such a lovely young couple, and what I had to do was go in there and just stand on my own and just let all that land. This room would have been full of people if it wasn't for COVID. And they have got to the point they can only invite 7 people. So this is going to be really hard for them because it's going to be standing, and it was all spaced out. So there was one person. It was a bit like a couple, but one of them was there and one of them was there. I was thinking that's really difficult for them because this is not the day that they envisaged. Thinking about their story, thinking about them as a couple, and setting that mood, bringing in that sacredness, because they're still stepping into life together as husband and wife. This is a marriage ceremony. This space, albeit in a wee Edinburgh Airport hotel, is from 2:00 going to be held by something bigger than us to allow these 2 young people to come together, surrounded by, but in the presence of their witnesses and a few of their family and friends. But let's bring in all those people that would have been invited.
So what sort of ritual would you put in place with just you in there? You've put your bag down, you've looked around, and it's kind of a cavernous space. What would you, apart from standing there and thinking, okay, what sort of
so
rituals
the first
would
thing
you
I
start?
do would be cleanse it. Mm-hmm. So I think you mentioned this before in a podcast. So you don't know what energy's been in that room previously, whether the previous day or 100 years before. You don't know what those walls are holding within their memory. So I like to cleanse that space, and so that's either with incense, going round the room with incense, and with intention, I'm cleansing this space of any sort of negative energy. It might be a smudge, if the building had a really dark history, it might be smudge. It might be Agua de Florida, which is a liquid, an energy cleanser. So you can spray that, and it doesn't have any smell. So some couples don't want the smell of incense in their room for guests coming in, so you could just spray that. So I would start off by cleansing all that space. So now we are starting with a blank canvas. And then I would maybe just put candles, we tea lights. They might not necessarily stay on, but I would, for the purpose of setting up, put wee candles in each of the four corners, and that's kindling the presence of spirit. So bringing spirit into that space. I'd maybe walk around the room, blessing or calling in, depending on calling in the elements, calling in the directions to hold the space. And then I would stand there and send that out. Here's their story. Here's what they've asked of me. We know what's going on in the world just now with the COVID, and so hold that. And I'd be speaking to Spirit, hold this space for us. Bring your full attention to this space for us. So I'm trying to bring that sacredness in. I'm saying I'm trying, yeah, bringing that sacredness in. The building itself might not have that natural sacredness, that history behind it that can make it easier, these natural spaces, these thin spaces. But you can absolutely do that.
Because when you describe that, and if I'm kind of doing the same in a space, visually, I visualize, and even when you're describing that, I could see it. It's almost like you are, those bubble outside things, like the igloo things.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like that. It's like you're almost like bringing a dome across a space that, because there's just, if you put all your energy out there, it can dissipate. There's if it's a vast space, so to sort of keep it, bringing people in, bringing that sort of feeling that it's a cosy kind of...
And that's a really good way to do it, because outside the walls there's a lot of noise. There's an airport, and you don't necessarily, I don't want that energy, that busy energy coming into the ceremonial space. So it's absolutely ideal to imagine that you're in a bubble, or you're creating a came around this circle of protection that nothing can get through, and it's just them and the sacred and whatever magic is going to happen between them. So sacred spaces are, again, just like sacred objects. You make them sacred through the meaning that you give to them. But couples don't always get that, or they don't know.
But then that's up to us to explain.
They don't come with that knowledge.
Yes, and I can't think of anybody that's never gone, oh no.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very... No. We want it
about,
devoid of any of that.
Yeah, it's storytelling.
Well, they wouldn't come to us.
Exactly.
They go to a humanist celebrant if that was the case.
Or just the registrar.
Or registrar or whatever. Because I think I told you this. I met with a couple online a couple of weeks ago. And when I said, what would you like? And they said, just something as short and sweet as possible. We don't want any faff. We don't want any... and I had to say, can I ask why you came to me? And they said, we're looking for celebrants, and your name came up, somebody recommended you or something. And I said, to be honest with what you're telling me, I think you would be much better placed looking at a registrar. Because what I do is very, very different. And I explained a wee bit about my work and how I come to it. And she said, no, actually, you're right. That's not what we're looking for. We are just looking for somebody to come in and marry us and just let us get to the party bit at the other side. And, that's okay. That's where they're at and their story. And
it is okay. But inside you think, you're missing a trick there.
Of course you are. Of course you are. But
the ceremony is so... pivotal. That is the day. To me, that is the moment. And when your couples come and they say, their ceremony is the most important part, you feel yourself going, yes, wanna watch here.
Yes, it's going to be a lot easier. Yeah, absolutely.
But when they go, drinks have to be served at such and such a time, you think, oh, okay. And you work within those confines, but we have to still work really hard to create something special and magical for them, whether they feel it or not.
Yeah. I was doing a wedding. I'll not say what hotel it was, but the bride was really, really nervous. We were up in the room with the bride and the venue events manager person was there. And the bride was saying, oh, I'm really nervous, I'm really nervous. And the events manager said, look, this next bit, you just have to get through it.
Oh, for God.
Now, I was standing right beside her. She knew I was the celebrant. She said, you just have to get through it, and once it's done, you can start enjoying yourself. And
it's like a dental appointment.
You know, that way you're like, do I step in here and go, hold on a wee minute? No, that's not how it works. And I thought, it's her wedding day. I'm not making it about me or, about how I work or anything. But really, for goodness sake, come on. But that just tells me that here we've got people who are in charge of these event spaces, and you see this again and again and again, who do not understand how ceremony works.
Because they're on a schedule.
They're on a schedule, but they don't understand how ceremony works. Even if you were on a schedule, if you understood how ceremony worked, you'd be able to say, okay, what does this ceremony need from me? Not necessarily what do I need from that person. What does this ceremony need from me, from us? What can we do to support this ceremony? Most venue staff see it as their ceremony, and you're just rocking up and reading a wee bit for a book and then you're disappearing. Whereas, of course, that is not what's happening. They're renting out a space, and we're coming in and trying to create something magical in that space that's going to set that couple up for the rest of their day and for the rest of their life.
It's quite interesting because the wedding that I did last weekend, lovely couple, girls, and I knew that they were very one particular bride was incredibly nervous, and the situation, we had to be fluid with it, but at the beginning, because I was hit with a curveball when I went in with kind of noise, or we can't do this, the ceremony space kind of just felt like, oh, okay. And I thought, right, just take the time here. I had the lovely Helen with me, which was great as well, one of our ceremonialists. And I started just with a bit of incense. And the photographer was so blown away by that. Like, he's a wedding photographer. He says, what are you doing? And I was setting out my bits and pieces, my can, whatever. He says, what are you doing? I says, I'm just sort of cleansing the space. I said, my brides are quite nervous and there's a lot of anxiety, so let's just try and bring something a bit more grounding into the air, into our space. And he sent me a lovely photo, actually, of me just in my own little...
Oh, lovely.
My own little world. But it was he's never seen anybody do that before. Because he was obviously caught up in the noise because everything was a curveball and he's thinking, well, where am I going to do my photos, blah, blah. And the whole venue just felt kind of like, oh yeah, this is okay. By doing that, the wedding coordinator, he was like, oh, we'll just go with it. It's fine, don't worry. It felt like we were just a family working together. And when you get that in all sorts of noise going on outside, then you know that you can hold your couple through that.
Yeah.
And it is about creating that space, of just taking time, stillness, a moment, and everybody sort of tunes into you and what you're doing, which stops everyone flying off in different directions.
Yes.
And that really helps, just by creating a bit of stillness and that moment in that space.
And sacred lives in the stillness. But you can also create sacred spaces in your own.
Oh yeah,
your own home. We've talked a wee bit about
it doesn't have to be a big grand affair.
No, absolutely not. We've talked about creating a wee altar on your windowsill. And that can become a sacred space.
Even sitting in your car, if you've got something there that's there, because a lot of the time, when do we actually just have time of silence? Switch the radio off. As you're driving, have that moment, have something in the car with you that just gives you that little bit of, peace
and tranquility.
Yeah,
And
enjoy the silence.
We were talking before this podcast about silence. I was talking about I'm going on holiday on my own, and Victoria was saying, is there, is it adults only? Is there a bit where you people will just speak to you, and you can? And I was talking about the Samai Ling monastery, which is down in the borders. You can go and visit, and they have a dining room, and part of it is silent. It's a silent table. So whenever I go down there, and sometimes I would go down and stay there for a few days, and that's always where I would sit, at the silent table.
Yes, don't talk to me.
And it sounds a bit like don't talk to me, but it's not. It's just you're just being still.
Mm-hmm. I find that a lot of people may feel this as well. At the end of a very busy day, if you're a mum or if you've been working and you're just running around, I have a little ritual that I do, which is very, very simple. I go into my lounge, I light my candle. I always have one centre candle. If I'm doing ceremony the next day, I'll normally light it for them. Mm-hmm. If I'm not, I light it for me. Mm-hmm. And I have my corner of my sofa. It's my space. And my kids are obviously in their rooms. My partner, he's normally doom scrolling in the kitchen or something, but it is stillness, it is quiet, and I'll sit there and then I'll put the TV on, and watch something, but it's almost to just quieten the mind, and that it feels like a sacred held space to me, and it's just a corner of my sofa.
And I love that because it lets people know that you can create sacred space anywhere. You're right, in your sofa, in your car, on your windowsill, anywhere at all. It's just bringing that intention, bringing that meaning to it. I love that. I love sacred spaces and sacred objects.
But then look at your wee ones, your grandbabies. In fact, my friend Dawn as well, she's looking after her granddaughter today, and she was laughing. She said, "Oh God, I'm just going to spend the entire morning inside a tiny pink tent."
Oh yes.
To a child, that's a sacred space.
It is a sacred. So I walked in this morning to their bedroom, and my eldest grandson Lockie, who is just about to turn 7, was dressed as a stormtrooper. And I saw him at the door, and I stopped and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, permission to enter, sir." And he just nodded his head like this. And so I stepped past him and I went round the corner, and there was my middle grandson now, Finn, who has just turned 4, and he was sitting in a wee armchair, a wee kid's armchair, but he'd put it up on his bed, and he was sitting there like king,
like a throne,
like King Arthur, right? And I saw him and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I'm sorry, permission to pass." And he just followed his big brother, and he did, yes, come on. And I put the duvet on the bed, and then I said, "Permission to exit," and they both went. Yeah, never said a word, just let me go. And I went out, and I was laughing to myself. That's their sacred space. They had created this, whatever it was they had created between them, and they were just lost in their wee world and having the most, happy, joyful, wonderful time. Kids are great at creating sacred space. We can, in fact, you could. I've said this before. I've said to you, and I've said to other students. I have trained celebrants for years, and I see the nerves that they have when I say, "I want you to create me a ceremony." And it's like, "Oh, so what do I do? So what are opening words? And what's this? And what goes in there?" And it's all panic. You say to a bunch of kids, "Create me a wee ceremony," and they would do it like that. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't even have to go and write it down. They would just, between them,
to come up with something,
and it would be beautiful, and it would be magical.
In the moment.
Get out their own way.
Fully present in everything.
Absolutely. They're wee experts. I love it. Right, so that's us. We've talked about sacred objects and sacred spaces, and that was wonderful. thank you so much to anybody who's watched and or listened.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us once again. If you have any comments.
Yes, if anybody wants to share something that's sacred to them, an object or something, please do. And subscribe if you're watching this for
and
the
if you have
first
any
time.
ideas for future topics,
Yes, please
let us know, and we'll do our very best. But thank you for watching, and as always, go on your soul.